Welcome, players. Are you ready to enter the fields of learning? Ready to combat the army of the ignorant? Spawning in now.
Hey there, this is Chuck
And Casey.
with the Knowledge Through Gaming podcast on our maiden voyage. First, we're going to explain the game that you can see for if you're watching the YouTube channel. This was a pre-recorded game. Sound did not sync up, so there's going to be no sound for it, which will be changed when Casey actually plays them in the future. This game is just a train wreck. It's still in beta. It's made by some company over in China. When you first start out, the language isn't even in English. As you can see in the video right there, I'm actually trying to mess with blueprints that I'd brought up to build a new ship that I'm trying to erase, and I had a miserable time with that.
Oh yeah, no. This game is a pain in the butt to figure out.
Yeah, especially when it starts you off in Chinese and you actually have to go in and try to change it.
I had to go into the reviews for this game to find the answer on how to change it to English.
Which is a lot smarter than what I did. I just fumbled around in the settings menu till I could find something to change the language.
You would.
But anyways, this episode, it's going to be on the history of submarines up until about pre-World War One. The reason I chose this terrible game is it's called SubmarineCraft. You literally get to build a submarine, which I figured goes perfect with this. None of the people in this line of history knew what they knew what they wanted to achieve. Not all of them knew how to achieve it. It was a lot of fumbling around. Essentially, what I did with this game, and the reason, but we decided to start the podcast is we're both huge gamers. Spend probably years of our lives already playing video games. And
So many.
I actually want to check our Steam sometime where you can go to that website and it'll tell you how many hours you have. That I think would be good to share with everybody.
I don't need that. That's just depressing.
You're going to have to share it if we get a following. But my parents always complained that video games were worthless, that they didn't have any educational value, which I found was the complete opposite, especially with researching these first two episodes for this podcast. Between this one and the oil one we both researched, the oil one I learned a ton on. Like, as boring as oil sounds, I'm actually kind of excited for that one, just due to how much I learned.
Oh yeah, no, I can't chew gum anymore because of that one.
Anyways, you'll be able to either watch the podcast on YouTube, that or we're gonna have a channel out. This game was like $1.99. As you can see in the video, you get to construct, you get to choose your materials. You then have to put like a wireless component. You can put radar. You can choose different things. You have to put the propellers, the engines, electrical generators. There's a lot to it, and sounds like it'd be such a fun game, but it unfortunately was not. And as you'll see, there was a lot of me building submarines, setting them sail, and then trying to build them again, which was fun, but then again, I knew it wasn't really going anywhere. And a lot of it was complicated.
I think it'd be a lot more interesting if when you actually are driving the sub, if it actually bears some resemblance to what you built.
Yeah.
But it looks the same no matter what you make.
Which I think you can change that in the 3D setting. I could not figure out how to do it. If we get far enough in the video, in the end, I actually change the look to a battleship, and so I'm driving around as a submarine underwater as a battleship. So yeah, I got a little bored with that.
I mean, yeah, this game's only like so.
Yeah.
You can't really go into this expecting a whole lot.
No, and I figured with it being our maiden one, at least it'll give people a chance to be like, these two are idiots, we need to help them. And people send in information just out of pity for us. And we'll be able to do an update later. Hopefully find a much better game. We always take game suggestions too. That would be amazing. There's not many in the older submarine genres. It's mostly like World War II and after. And even for this research, I even purchased my first book in a long time, The Story of Submarines by George Weller, which was
I
from
didn't know
19...
you could read.
Oddly enough, even with going to Cadillac Public Schools, I definitely figured out I can. Uh, and which the great thing was, this actually lined up with all the websites I looked at. Uh, the thing I was so worried about was going through all these different websites, finding all this good information, and then bam, it's fake. So that worried me a lot.
There's enough false information out there. We don't need to be adding to that.
Yeah, and if there's if we get listeners and any of them find anything, I hope they'll send in updates and tell us, this information was wrong, or hey, you skipped over this sub. Could you talk about this one? Because if we get enough for another podcast episode, I'd love to do another one. There was so much that I missed that I skipped over just because I was going more war related to lead up to our World War II, the U-boat game, which I'm super excited about. But
And if you're gonna send us in information on stuff we screwed up, free to be as verbally abusive as you want to. We respond positively to that based on our upbringing.
oh yeah, the funnier the better too. You can insult me as much as you want as long as it's funny. Found that out while doing the research. Ships will use them to avoid capsizing. It'll counteract like waves and stuff from essentially capsizing and losing the ship beneath the waves. And then water obviously will help you submerge, releasing water will help you surface. It becomes way bigger in World War II, especially when they stay under longer periods of time.
Yeah.
First known recorded use of a submarine for battle actually came during the Revolutionary War around 1705. There was a Yale grad and inventor, David Bushnell, along with Isaac Doolittle, that created the turtle, which I didn't really look into why they called it the turtle, because it's shaped like an egg. So yeah, that's interested in learning too, but it was a foot and hand powered crank, so you essentially were exerting a lot or effort to use two corkscrew type propellers. One would help you dive and come to the surface, and the other would move you back and forth. And then it also used air-filled ballasts to maintain its balance. He'd have to either like push the water out or let the water in. There's a very small coning tower, which the coning tower, it's easier to recognize on a sub. If you look in the game, that top little bit on the shell or the vessel, I don't know what you'd call it, the body, but that little part is a coning tower where in like World War II, you'll have the optical devices so you can see while the sub is partially submerged. And the turtle eyed one, that wasn't very big, it was just glass. They would supply oxygen to the pilot. Bushnell actually had type of torpedo. This is where the concept of torpedoes for combat came in. Oh yeah, do you know where the term torpedo was derived?
No, I can't say I've ever looked into that one.
Yeah, from the research I found, came from torpediad. I probably butchered that, which was an electric ray or crampfish that would shock its prey to death, which throws me off because torpedoes don't really shock, but
they just blow things all to heck.
that or it's been known to have come from or torpere, which means numb, sluggish, which is, once we get into actual torpedoes later on, or during one of our next episodes, is way better of a description. Torpedoes in their early stages it was fired and it would just go in a straight line, and that's it. It either hit something or it missed. But anyways,
Yes.
yeah, especially before they've ended up figuring out something. Once we get into like the later episodes, we'll end up finding out more about that, the discoveries that helped them actually predict where they were going to go.
Gotta lead that target.
Yeah, oh yeah, especially back then, which by hand and human calculations I'm sure was a pain. But Anyways, this early one was just like a bomb. It was gunpowder that they were going to use to blow a hole in the hull to sink the ship. The original pilot of the Turtle was going to be David's, but after extensive training, he ended up becoming ill just like a month or so before the attack was to take place. So Ezra Lee was actually the next one to pilot it, and he was only given about 2 weeks of training.
Oh, that sucks. I'd be like, nah,
Yeah, especially
nah.
with all you have to do. Apparently, it was super extensive and took a lot of labor to actually get it going. So 2 weeks
Now,
does not seem like enough time.
that first guy, like you said, he got sick from all the training.
No, he ended up coming down with an illness. He was I believe a farmhand is what they said. And
Uh,
he was super fit, so it would have been like nothing for him. But then Ezra took over as the pilot once he became sick.
okay, I was just gonna ask you, maybe he got like pneumonia or something.
I don't remember. It was but they didn't want to push it back at all.
Yeah,
So they ended up just switching over. And it's odd because both of them are named Ezra. But
yeah, that
anyway,
is.
yeah, yeah, that threw me off a lot when I was doing the research. His target was the British HMS Eagle, which was anchored. They were going to attack in September of 1776. Lee actually rode for about 2.5 hours just fighting the tide before he was even able to start the Eagle. So he must have been exhausted just getting to that ship.
Oh yeah, no, God, no, 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that
Nah, no.
like I don't even know if I could ride a bike for that long, let alone trying to keep a ship in the water.
I might be able to ride a bike for that long, but I'm gonna hate my.
And then I think it said that the drill ended up getting stuck because he wasn't able to bore through the copper hull to attach the explosive. I'm almost guessing that he was probably tired by that point.
Oh yeah. There's probably no energy left to do any kind of.
No, and then there were a few more attempts after that. There was like one or two more attempts by the turtle trying to sink other ships, but eventually it was sunk. So it never ended up actually making any successful contact. So I mean, I can't even imagine what kind of impact that would have had on the British had it been successful. Because he ended up just throwing the torpedo out and it blew up nearby. It didn't end up hurting anybody. But if he would have managed to sink that ship, that war could have turned quickly on the American side much sooner.
So let me get this straight. That's the first torpedo ever used, right?
Yeah, that was, and it wasn't even a torpedo, it was a charge they were going to attach.
Yeah.
He just ended up having to throw it out, and since it was like 150 pounds of gunpowder, it eventually exploded.
Uh huh.
Yeah, it
I only
was.
imagine when he gets back and they're just like, "You had one job, one."
Ended up making it back from that first one, so, and I believe if, for in some of the stories, he had been spotted. So he like came under fire and then ended up making it far enough where an American should pick him up and haul him back. Because I'm sure he was not gonna make it as tired as he had to have been.
God no! And you said they spotted him too?
Yeah, they ended up I think firing at him. I don't.
Oh my God, no! I'd be like all terrified, like, oh, no, no,
uh,
like this can't be how I die.
that would definitely not be how I wanted to go. Yeah, yep. And then the next one was a sub named the Nautilus. It was the first of two that would actually take that name that I found. It was in the 1800s. It was actually sail powered on the surface. Then the sail would fold down, and when it submerged, it was actually crank powered. And this odd sub was actually designed by Robert Fulton while working for the French government. And it appears to be the first plane that used hydroplanes, which are in newer subs are essential for helping it to either like dive or come to the surface because it'll help push the pressure of forward momentum to help it move.
God.
Which, yeah, it becomes. I don't know how many more after this actually used them, so I'm not. This was just the first example that I'd actually found.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it was. He actually tried to experiment with it as well for oxygen for the crew, but he wasn't able to actually off oxygen to where it make a long trip. It was so encumbersome to try to bottle and contain oxygen just to, you would essentially run out of oxygen while you're underwater for any type of long distance.
That'd be
Which,
another thing I'd be terrified of is suffocating.
oh yeah, because I think you like start getting a headache and then you kind of like pass out. I should have looked into the effects of like oxygen deprivation because that scares me so much too. Like
Oh god, yeah.
this whole research, the way some of these guys die is horrifying. Like I never would have made it.
Oh yeah, absolute night
Uh,
field for me.
Especially when they start playing with like gas combustion and coal cuz you're burning those inside a ship underwater, so you're burning up all your oxygen.
Oh my god, that's even worse.
Yeah, and this one didn't end up making it. Napoleon was admirals all considered this concept to be extremely ungentlemanly because you were going to kill a man and he wasn't going to see it coming. So they'd have you stand in columns and shoot at each other. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense. But
Yeah.
even then, he was never to make that concept reachable. He eventually went to America and the government funded him on some experiments, but
Okay.
uh, he failed to sink the ship they wanted him to because they draped it in nets, and he was never able to get the explosive in far enough to sink that. Oddly enough, which we might eventually do an episode on this, he ended up making his money inventing steam paddlers, which are like steamboats with the big paddles on the back. And he would use profits from that to try to create another sub, but he'd never end up launching that other sub before his death.
Yeah, I got to imagine safety standards today on those are probably a hell of a lot better than they were.
Oh yeah, especially because they're out to sea for months. They have to have like bathrooms and kitchens and all that other
Yeah.
stuff. As to where these, some of them you'll see they don't even make them back. Like if one blows up now, it's all over the news.
Oh yeah.
Yep, the next one actually would be one of the first two during the Civil War. The Confederates were actually super interested in subs, which I never knew, but makes a lot of sense after doing all the research. The Union Army actually had blockaded southern ports, and they were cutting off all the cotton sales to Europe. So the South wasn't making any money.
Oof.
Yeah, Theodore Stoneleigh created a small craft called David after the biblical story of David. It was a little steam-powered ship. It wasn't able to completely submerge due to the boiler of things. This one couldn't submerge because the boiler required so much that it had to stay partially above the surface just to keep it running and not kill the crew.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then,
you kind of want to avoid killing the crew.
yeah, unless you just want to use it as to try to ram something straight ahead of it.
Load that sucker full of death row and send her off.
It is actually a good idea. That's what they should have done. This one
Uh,
actually created the concept of more like a torpedo device. It was a long pole called a spar, and they would attach the explosive to the end of it and use it as a ramming device. So you would ram your sub into a ship hoping to blow it up. Which
kind of sounds like they were suicide bombing it.
that's the thing, and they like created this hoping they would survive, like hoping they had enough distance in between the explosive and them to bring down the ship and limp back to shore.
Oh god. If you took like a, I would say like a grenade, pulled the pin and punched somebody while it went off.
Yeah.
But I think like, just to give it like a little extra oomph, and you're expecting, all right, this is gonna turn on. You're expecting it to like walk live.
Oh my gosh, how much explosives they use in this next one. For this one, they ended up trying to attack a ship called the New Ironsides. They weren't actually able to sink it. They punched a hole in the bulkhead. But this explosion far, extinguished the boiler, and 2 of the 4 crew actually abandoned the sub.
Oh my god.
The one sailor that couldn't swim who remained on the ship actually tried and was able to restart the boiler, and they were able to get the ship away.
Yeah, it'd be a definite panic moment for me.
Oh yeah, I'd be the one who couldn't swim. I'd be trying to. I'm either gonna going down with the sub or I'm restarting that boiler. That's my only 2 options.
I'd be one of the two that ditched it.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt that you would. I don't remember if this was a story or not, but I think one climbed up the ship trying to get to the actual Union ship.
I'm I'm with you guys now. That's a death trap down there.
Yeah, and the one around the same time was invented near 1863 by Horace L. Hunley. He created this in Mobile, Alabama, so you know this one was not going to turn out well for any of the parties involved. This one gets to be bad. They were trying to fight those Union blockades to get their goods out. The ship required 1 pilot and 7 men, because the 7 men would have to crank power the propeller to move it. During the trials of this sub sank twice. During the second sinking, Hunley himself was killed because he couldn't find enough crew willing to go on another trial run in it.
Oh my god.
It killed between 11 and 13 people and was salvaged every time, not rebuilt. They went down there, got it, and recruited. This one ended up having like a 17-foot spar, again filled with black powder. They were sent to attack the USS Housatonic.
Okay.
And
That just kind of sounds like they're looking at it like maybe we should stop using this. It keeps killing people. It's like nah. They were using it wrong. We'll be fine.
yeah, that's why I can't believe they got it a third go. Like, I don't know who stepped on it after Hunley was killed. It's like the dude who created it's dead. Buy it. And you just pulled it back up for us to use again.
Just
Oddly enough, they sank the Houston.
oh my
The
god.
charge entered the side of the hull, sank the Housatonic, and with it and killed its crew.
Oh my god. So it was literally a suicide mission.
Yeah, this was essentially the first kamikaze. And at this point, they never ended up salvaging again. Later on down...
But
What's that?
like I was just like you had to imagine it had to be like someone higher up that's like, all right, we don't have any more money to put into this thing. Get the stupidest people you can find. Tell them they're going to pilot this thing. Don't tell them about all the deaths. Like we don't care if they come back or not.
Yeah,
But you're at least slightly competent enough to get the job done.
Oh, yeah. Especially since this was a military, so they could just go out there and say, hey, you are going to pilot this no matter what you want.
Oh, well, there was like one angry guy in there who knew it was complete bull crap, and when they started going down, just going on a tyrant about how he was right.
This had to have been one of them draw station and you're getting on the ship. Oh,
If they refused and ran away, they'd be
yeah,
what do you call it? Like going AWOL or whatever, and then they'd be criminals anyway.
yeah, they'd be executed, especially during the Civil War and being a Southern sailor. Oh yeah, I can guarantee they would have shot him.
Yeah, you're screwed either way.
Yeah.
This is a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. Then the next sub came during the German-Danish War between 1848 and 1851. It was inspired by Danish ships that were blockading the Persians. It was created by Wilhelm Bauer and was called the Sea Devil. Bauer actually studied the ship construction and the hydraulics for the Danes. And this came as Prussians were being forced to load ships with explosives and just trying to send them out to sea to break these blockades. They just set up the explosives, light it on, either sink the blockading ships or force them to move.
That seems a lot smarter than just putting your bomb and hoping to poke the enemy and walk away from that alive.
I mean, that's a hard situation to be in, just because if it's night, they might not see the ship, but even then, just sending a ship at them. But I
Yeah,
mean, at least the ship could be on. You got that going for you.
yeah.
I think this was a point in time where they really didn't care about men. They just throw more at them.
Oh yeah, no.
This about 26 foot long and weighing 35 tons. It it was one of the first ones that I could see that used like pumps to operate the bilges and ballasts. Uh, yeah. Uh, Bauer had made the hull thinner though due to the budget, so instead of being able to dive to almost 100 foot as he had originally planned, he was actually only able to dive to about 30. And again, this one was crank powered. The first test run of this was a sign. It was disastrous. Bauer with two other actually were in the sub when it started to leak during the test.
Oh no. I'd be getting the heck out of there.
That's where they weren't able to open the hatch because the sub's pressure wasn't equal to the outside water's pressure.
Oh no. Like yeah, no.
They were trapped in this until it sank to the floor and the pressure equalized enough to open the hatch.
It's terrifying. Like that be one of my worst nightmares there.
During this sinking, apparently broke out between the three of them. Nobody really knows why, but I can only imagine they were cussing him out on how they were going to die in that contraption.
Oh yeah. Like if I'm gonna kick the crap out of the guy who's responsible for my death.
Oh yeah, and on top of it, that would go end up biting him in the rear because he wouldn't really be able to find anybody to go on any future tests during his later designs.
I would.
About 130 successful dives from what I found, down to around a depth of 150. One of the final tests, though, the admirals of the Tsar misled him on where the ship was, and he struck an underwater bank. Bauer and the crew would again escape this one, but this actually put an end to it, and he didn't have any other subs from what I could find. There was a story though about the Tsar Alexander II band on board the sub, and as it began to surface, they could hear music coming from beneath the waves.
Oh nice.
Looks like we go into the next sub, which is Le Plongear, I think.
Le Plombier?
Yeah, you probably hit it more than I did. There for some of these there weren't really any pronunciations or like audio files online that I could find.
Oh no, why would they want to make it easy?
This one was created in 1864 by Charles Brunn with the supervision and direction of Captain Simmons. It stuck with the concept of ramming, obviously. Why would such a efficient form of combat be abandoned? But this one introduced an electronically fired spar torpedo that was, I believe...
That's bad.
What I found, though, is there were stories that they risked the torpedo coming back at them, though, especially if they were sailing forward.
Oh, like a ping pong paddle.
Yes.
Like, I was saying, all right, let's reel her back in, but this is like a bounces back towards.
Yeah. Especially if you're moving forward and current's going against you, you'd fire it, it'd come right back into you. What's that?
I would have to ask how many times that they actually got hit by their own shot.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember hearing that story, but I don't think I checked to see if they had actually done it or if they were affected by it any. This would actually become one of the first submarines that was not hand cranked. So that was probably a relief for the crew.
Yeah.
It was powered by a piston-driven engine that was run on compressed air, and from what I read on this too, these tanks were huge. The whole submarine ended up being like 420 tons.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, they were like 23 large oxygen tanks. But the plus side to this one is not only did it move the ship, it actually the crew. so you weren't as worried about dying of oxygen deprivation.
Yeah, I
But
don't know. That would at least be a relief.
yeah,
Now you just got to worry about your missiles coming right back in your face.
yeah, and then due to that weight and everything, it only could travel about 5 nautical long range at all. Oh yeah, there's in that video when my sub hits like a 45-degree angle after taking on water. I can't tell if that's a glitch or if that's the ballasts, because those ballasts, I couldn't tell if I was not creating ballasts correctly to even how it was sailing. But yeah,
I couldn't remember.
I don't know. This one was so hard to do. The only reason I wanted to do it was because it was such a good concept and it was ingenious for this episode because it's creating a sub. I even made one out of wood, and once I sank low enough, part of the pressure or a glitch, and I started taking on water.
I feel like that was what happened if we actually tried to make a sub.
Oh yeah, I
Like,
don't
I
doubt
don't even
that.
think we'd probably get even that far.
Ah, dude, we neither of us have the time. I barely had the patience to play the get into it. I couldn't imagine us putting forth enough effort to create a submarine.
Newspapers would read two idiots die trying to take handmade sub into the lake.
Uh, oh yeah, it would collapse in on us within the first 5 minutes, and neither of us can swim, so then we got that.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, well, then you suck. Oh yeah, it's Roy that can't swim. My bad.
yeah,
So you're scared of water and you can swim? I have a legitimate
yeah.
reason.
I can swim. Yeah, I don't. I can't see what's going to be around me when I'm underneath the water.
Valid point, but I have a legitimate reason. I sink. I swim
Yeah,
like a rock right to the bottom.
I'm not terrified of drowning. I'm terrified of what's in the abyss.
All right. Do you know, since I talked about knots and nautical miles, do you know what a knot or a nautical mile is?
Not even a little bit.
It's super complicated. I hope we get fans that can tell me, because a nautical mile is roughly 1.15 miles. This is based on the fact that the Earth is divided into 360 degrees. It's then divided into 60 minutes per degree, with each minute being a nautical mile, which comes out to 360 times 60 is 21,600 nautical miles around the globe. For this ship, the 4 knots, it would be 21,600 divided by 4. Then you divide it by 24 for days. It'd be 225 days if my understanding of this is correct, which is probably not. I'm
It's like
probably,
2/3 of a year.
yeah, that'd be super slow.
Yeah.
I'm
Do not-
hoping I'm hoping we get an audience and somebody sends in and is like, "Hey, dummy, this is how that goes." Because I don't know, I found it so complicated for some reason.
We're just not smart enough to understand it.
Yeah,
That's the issue.
I was never math. I'm a criminal justice major. I took the core math that I was required to get my degree.
I'm just lazy.
The next sub of were created by this guy. It was created in 1865, and it was created by a communist, pacifist who was rights. Which I say that because women's rights in 1862 was super, super odd for, like, I don't know, a man of this stature, I guess, creating a sub who was also communist. So I just found that odd thing that everybody put in his bio.
Yeah.
His name was Narcisse Monturiol
You can just sound it out.
Esriol. Dude, I can't. It's
Are you
so
having a stroke
complicated.
or something?
No, it's Monturiol. Monturiol. That's what you get. If somebody has a pronunciation, they can send it to me. Did not know who it was. Anyways, his used a system of weights and ballast to maintain its position and depth. It was the first engine powered submarine. The last one was pistons, and that was oxygen powered, but this is the first engine powered. It wasn't actually conventional wood or coal, which obviously would use up all the oxygen. He used a combination from a chemical potassium chlorate and manganese dioxide to produce heat with an oxygen byproduct. So he ended up providing oxygen to the crew while also powering the ship, which is a huge step for submarines at this point. With him being a pacifist, I wonder if he, like, after death was like, how mad he would be that it became like such a huge thing for naval war, like the world wars. Anyways, this one was able to go about 4 knots. It was civilian based, I believe coral. He had seen a coral diver die, and that's actually why he was trying to build it, is so they would have a safer way to actually collect coral. But he ran out of funding, and collectors was required to give it to them, and they ended up scrapping it. No one else would
Oof,
back him to do any further research.
that is rough.
Yeah, that kind of sucks. Because between the engine system with that oxygen byproduct, he could have made some massive steps in in general. Not so
Oh
much
yeah,
warfare, but you could have stayed down there
crap.
for essentially ever at that rate.
Yeah.
Uh, then the next one is the second Nautilus in 1886. This was the first craft. The issue with that is batteries at the time were very primitive and needed to be recharged often, so there was no go for any long distance traveling.
Yeah.
It took about, it'd go about 80 miles before a recharge, but you have to think 40 miles because you have to have 40 miles back. And it was only able to dive 25 feet. And yeah, there'd eventually be a submarine, a newer submarine with the same name that came up in a lot of searches. That's really all I found on this one was the electric motor made it a pretty big step, because later in like World War I and World War II, diesel engines would be used on the surface and electric engines would be used underneath the waves to conserve oxygen.
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea, because,
Yeah, so you don't kill off your crew again.
yeah,
They did
seems to be a
enough.
pretty common theme with some of these.
The next major step came in 1897 with the design of the by American engineer Simon Lake. This was a 36-foot sub. This one introduced engines, which issue because gasoline is, other than being highly flammable, it's also requires a spark. So especially if you have like a wooden hulled ship, you're at risk of lighting the whole thing on fire.
Oh yeah, no, you're
This one has a cigar shape that like modern subs have. Um, it was one of the first to introduce periscopes as well, so that they could see while submerged. So that was a step forward.
yeah. I guess that would be one of my other questions. How did all of these how did all of these subs go about checking stuff out while they were submerged and everything before the periscope?
Yeah, a lot of them were them coning towers like the Turtle had, where it'd just be
Okay.
like, it was essentially created so that they could just barely be above the surface while submerged, so they could see and it'd be harder to see them. A lot of the
Okay.
attacks took place at night, because then of night plus the low profile of your ship made it so you could get a lot closer to the enemy before they'd actually see you.
Okay. So
Yeah,
you have
that
like one person able to see everything, really, and relaying orders.
I believe for the more modern ones, like the Turtle, it was just Ezra, so he just could see while moving. I believe one person could actually lure.
Okay.
It was odd too, as it had so that when it submerged, it could drive along the and had a wet diving chamber so that they could leave it and explore the surrounding area, which I feel is more of a like a civilian sub trait nowadays. I don't know of too many like military subs that try to get out and explore, but that's a huge step, especially for 1897. The first designs seem to have been successfully able to travel from Virginia to New Jersey, and there'd eventually be a second design later on. But I didn't really go into too much on that one because it was civilian, but that the introduction of the periscope was kind of a big step.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then we're getting more towards World War One. And it's about to wrap up this little trip through history. There were a few more designs and experiments than I have listed here, but one I looked through, French alone had about 80 different designs and experiments just for submarines alone.
Oh,
So,
dang.
yeah, if we get enough interest to where we actually more than happy to look through more of them, I'm sure there were more interesting ones. This one came up on like the History Channel and stuff. And most of them seem to be a huge step towards modern military subs, which I want to eventually stick you with like exploration so we can do Subnautica and force you to fight stuff underwater. And
So that one of the, I don't think you really fight much. It's more based on exploration.
is it?
Yeah.
I thought there was those monsters that could kill you.
Oh yeah, no, they're absolutely terrifying monsters.
Oh,
You get like a pocket knife though.
oh yeah.
I don't know if like when you actually get a sub, if there's actually like weapons. I think there's something where you can like use stasis on something to freeze it in place for a little minute, and
Oh,
then I mean I guess I've seen videos where people will get out of their sub after freezing something.
stab it to
I,
death.
yeah, cut it with the pocket.
Oh,
So all you get is a pocket.
all right, so I mean that'd still be great for the sub exploration. I mean, I don't know. There's so much. Like we could go so many directions with this, which
Oh,
is why I'm glad we did this. At the same time, there's so much that I want to go through that it made it so hard to limit it down.
oh yeah.
Then yep. Look, it was Irish-born engineer and inventor who built the sub called the Holland in 1898. And he started designing it as early as around 1875. That's when he started designing subs in general. That one was pretty spotty on information. He was actually commissioned by the U.S. Navy. This would actually be the very first sub that I found that had torpedo tubes and a cannon on top as well that was able to fire at ships while on the surface. It was a gas powered engine for the surface and then an electric powered motor for the submerged travel. So much like World War II, but eventually that'd be more diesel. But I mean, around at the same time as when there was a German engineer who had these diesel engines into use through experimentation because it doesn't. It's a lot safer.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, because you don't risk blowing up your crew.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to do that.
They were moving a little bit towards a little bit away from the suicidal bombings at this point.
Yeah.
Yep, the
Yeah.
gasoline was both dangerous and required for the relatively and were at risk of exploding. So
Oh no, thank you.
just
No, thank
were almost destined to die in these subs.
Jesus.
Regardless of this, it was like a huge step forward in submarine development, pushing us towards modern submarines.
I can imagine.
Sub actually wouldn't see combat before it was decommissioned. There were a few others purchased by the U.S. Navy, but this one would never actually see combat. Yeah, that's really it. That all I found up until about World War One. That actually wraps up our little dive in history of submarines. Yeah, and like I told you earlier, if anybody listens to Time Suck, yeah, they just had an update today about was about the military, and they ended up doing an update for submarine today. So I was upset that I spent all this time research. I would never steal information from somebody else. Like I had looked all this up too long, and if you
You poor
haven't,
baby.
hey, let's make Dan think that we were trying to copy off his information. Like that's why I don't even want to do any subjects he's done. If anybody is listening that doesn't listen to Time Suck and you have a very morbid sense of humor, listen to.
Oh yeah.
I love that podcast. So inspired me to do this, but obviously he's got his own thing, and I wanted to do gaming. Gives me an excuse to go out and play video games. How it relates to the real world. This is essentially my dream, or at least my dream as a kid, because this is awesome. This episode alone, I learned so much, and then the oil one too. Like I said earlier, learned so much on that one. It's just
Oh yeah.
unfortunately for our viewers, the game sucked. So I hate that we had to do this game because I just feel like, because you're not even watching it right now. I'm playing it on my game. We really didn't talk about it all that much. We want to go into way deeper into comparing this to the game. But this one was just so hard with it being such a bad game, being so like it's in beta and it's just rough all around. It fits so well into this topic. Yeah, I'm actually at the
Oh yeah.
part now where I had changed the skin to the battleship and I'm sailing my submarine underwater. And it looks like I'm just sailing a battleship underwater. But
I mean, your own stuff. You might have some interest in it.
I don't even know. I would say no because it's more frustration than anything. I spent like an hour playing that game and I went through the tutorials again. I wasn't able to find any information. The game's that it's not even really worth playing to me. I will never play it again. The only reason I wanted it is this episode, particularly with this. I created a wooden ship. I messed around for like the other night. It was fun to mess around, but it just was so much frustration. It wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah.
But if anybody enjoys this episode, you can find us on Facebook. We'll eventually get to the point where we're doing Twitch because he's going to stream the videos so that I can watch them and we can comment. This video is going to be on YouTube, so vice versa. You can listen on podcast, watch it on YouTube. This one was pretty dry. We didn't go into the video much. It's our first episode, first real anything I've ever put out. So I wanted to set this one up to do World War II subs. Just U-boats are a huge interest of mine. And then like you're working on cults right now. I'm working on oil refining. Going to so many other topics, which that's funny. Cults. We were just talking about Time Suck too.
Curious how Nimrod.
Yeah. But yeah, I still want to stay away from any he's done, at least for now.
Oh
Just
yeah.
because I don't want anybody thinking we're trying to be our own thing. I'm just so interested in this stuff, especially with some of the but like Far
Yeah.
Cry for that one is such a good one.
All right. This has definitely been a great learning experience. I mean, I've learned a lot just listening to you.
Oh yeah, and just all the information, especially since you're organized it. We're gonna learn a lot, and hopefully somebody at least enjoys this, so we can eventually do more with this, get some better equipment. I would love that.
Oh, that'd be.
Yeah, and like right now we're aiming for every other week. I want to try for weekly if we can get the information fast enough, but I think every other week right now is a more feasible just due to how busy you
Yeah,
and I
time
both
constraint.
are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, when I was researching it, I was doing like 3 to 4 different sources just for one piece of information, just because I wanted it to, be right. So it was, I don't know, a whole lot of information.
Oh yeah.
And plus, we want to make sure it's real. I mean, at least it gives the listeners a chance to send it in so we know if anything's wrong, which I would be more than happy to fix. Just another episode on it.
Oh, absolutely.
And then once we get people to follow, maybe they can tell us how to make this better and more enjoyable to listen to. I would love to have a successful podcast. That would be amazing. Find games that people actually want to say who listens, who makes games. Then we could actually do that where we have a partner on it, get some more sponsors and stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, we want to make this to help entertain people. Anything we can do to improve that to make this more enjoyable.
Yeah, because I'm sure this one was fun, though. I definitely enjoyed it, learning, so...
I'm hoping the people that end up listening to this, we hope they end up enjoying it too.
Yeah, plus once we have people following that can help us out, we'll actually know what to do, so we can tailor it to actually make it more enjoyable. So I guess we'll see. This was about an hour, though. That was pretty decent length, I think. Not too
Yeah.
terribly long. But other than that, this has been Knowledge Through Gaming. About to play the outro. Is there anything else you want to say to them?
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and I hope you come back for more.
Yeah. Actually, before we do that, too, I actually want to look up that song. The intro song we got was actually said we didn't have to say who it was, but it's called Hungry for Disaster by Silent Partner. It was in the YouTube audio library's free music. If you can, for having no words and only being about 1 minute and 50 seconds, such a catchy like song as what made me go with like the gas mask like filter for the intro and stuff for levels, because I want to kind of do like a level based thing, or where each episode is a level or something like that. And just that song was awesome and
Oh yeah,
free, so they helped us out, so I wanted to give them a big shout out too.
that beat.
Yeah, for finding music that was so stressful, and they helped a ton by having that song out. All right, but anyways, this has been Knowledge Through Gaming. Here's the outro.
We survived the quest, but were we successful?